She stood in the middle of a 5-star ballroom, wearing a dress she almost didn't buy, holding a glass of champagne she almost didn't drink, when her ex-husband walked in with his new wife on his arm and cruelty written all over his smile. He had spent 3 years making her feel worthless. He had signed the divorce papers like he was doing her a favor. But what Derek Weston never saw coming, what none of them saw coming, was the man who crossed that marble floor, took her hand, and said 4 words that changed everything. "This is my wife." Natalie Hargrove was the kind of woman people described as almost beautiful, almost successful, almost enough. That was how Derek used to phrase it anyway. Not out loud. Derek Weston was too practiced for that kind of open cruelty. He did it in smaller ways. A pause before complimenting her dress. A slight frown when she spoke at dinner parties. A habit of finishing her sentences in a way that made her original thought sound smaller, less formed, like clay that needed his hands to become something real. They had married young. Natalie was 24, fresh out of a graphic design program in Portland, Oregon, still carrying the kind of hope that made her reckless. Derek was 31, already the regional director of Weston Capital Group, a real estate investment firm built on his father, Howard Weston's, money and Derek's hunger to prove he'd earned it himself. He was sharp, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly charming, in a way that functioned like a drug in those early days. He remembered her coffee order. He opened car doors. He said things like, "You see the world differently, Natalie. That's rare." She believed every word. For the first 2 years, she painted, took freelance design contracts, and poured herself into building their home in Lake Oswego, a suburb south of Portland, where the houses had 3-car garages, and the neighbors waved from behind their hedges, but never really talked. She was good at making things beautiful. Their house was featured in a local magazine. Their Christmas parties were the kind people still talked about in January, but Derek had quietly stopped seeing her. Not in the dramatic way that makes good television. No explosive fights, no mysterious late nights that she had to track. It was more insidious than that. He simply started living around her. She would say something at dinner, and he would respond to his phone. She would reach for him in bed, and he would already be turned away. At his company's annual gala, she overheard him tell his colleague, a man named Philip Garrett, "Natalie's great, but she's never really understood the business side of things." She was standing 4 feet away. She filed for divorce on a Tuesday in November. Derek did not fight it. He sat across from his attorney, Thomas Birch, a man so expensive his business cards felt heavy, and signed with a kind of polished indifference that told Natalie everything she needed to know. He had already moved on before she'd even decided to leave. The settlement was fair, technically. She got the house, a portion of their shared savings, and 0 alimony, because, as Thomas Birch explained with a kind smile that didn't reach his eyes, Derek feels strongly that Natalie is more than capable of supporting herself. She sold the house 6 months later, because she couldn't afford to keep it without his income, and because every room in it remembered things she was trying to forget. She moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District in Portland, took a full-time position at a mid-sized branding agency called Holt and Pine Creative, and spent 8 months mostly quiet. She called her sister, Claire Hargrove Banks, every Sunday. She made friends with a woman named Rosie Carmichael, who lived 2 floors above her, and who always knocked with coffee already in hand. She ran 3 miles every morning along the waterfront, because motion felt like the only thing that was genuinely hers. She did not hear from Derek until the invitation arrived. It came in a cream envelope with gold foil lettering, the kind of stationery that costs more than most people's electric bills. The return address was a venue in downtown Portland, a renovated hotel called the Alderton House that had been featured in Travel Plus Leisure twice in 1 year. You are cordially invited to the celebration of Derek and Cassandra Weston, a private dinner in honor of their marriage. Saturday, the 14th of September. Natalie set the invitation on her kitchen counter and looked at it for 3 days without touching it again. "Well, you are absolutely not going," Rosie said, sitting cross-legged on Natalie's couch with a glass of red wine in one hand and the invitation in the other. "This is a trap. This is textbook narcissist behavior. He wants you to see him happy, so you feel bad about yourself." "Maybe," Natalie said. "Not maybe. Definitely. Who invites their ex-wife to their wedding celebration dinner? A sociopath, that's who." "It wasn't a wedding celebration. They already got married. This is apparently a reception for family and business associates. And you're invited because his mother sent the list," Natalie said quietly. "Margaret called me. She said she still considers me family. She said she'd really like me to come." She paused. "She also said Derek doesn't know she added me." Rosie stared at her. "Oh, that's a whole different kind of trap." Margaret Weston was 71 years old, sharp as a letter opener, and quietly furious at her son in ways she expressed through strategic social maneuvering rather than direct confrontation. She had loved Natalie. She had called after the divorce to say, voice carefully controlled, "I want you to know that what happened is not a reflection of your worth, sweetheart." Natalie had cried for an hour after hanging up. Going to the event would be masochistic. Going might also mean facing the thing she had been circling around for the past 14 months. The fact that Derek had moved on so completely, so effortlessly, that his new wife was apparently already Mrs. Weston, while Natalie was still figuring out how to reintroduce herself to her own life. She called Claire. "Go," Claire said immediately. "Rosie says it's a trap. It is a trap. Go anyway. Wear something that makes him regret every single choice he's ever made. I'll come with you." Claire Hargrove Banks was 2 years older than Natalie, had the same dark auburn hair and the same stubborn jawline, and had a gift for clarity that sometimes felt brutal and always felt like love. She lived in Seattle with her husband, Tom Banks, and their 2 daughters, and she had never once pretended to like Derek, which meant Natalie had spent years quietly keeping her sister at a distance to protect the marriage. She regretted that now. "Okay," Natalie said. "I'll go." She bought a dress the following Thursday, a deep emerald silk with a low back and a neckline that was elegant rather than obvious, from a boutique on Northwest 23rd called Linden and Grace. The woman at the counter, whose name tag read Patricia, wrapped it in tissue paper and said, "Whoever you're wearing this for better be worth it." Natalie smiled and said, "I'm wearing it for me," and meant it. What she did not tell Claire. What she did not tell Rosie. What she had not told anyone. 3 weeks before the invitation arrived, she had met someone, not in the way that required definition yet. It was a professional meeting, technically. Holt and Pine Creative had landed a contract with a real estate development company called Callaway Group, and she had been assigned as the lead designer on a brand identity overhaul. The CEO, Sebastian Callaway, had requested a direct briefing. She had walked into a corner office on the 22nd floor of a building on Southwest Broadway, expecting an assistant and a 30-minute window. Instead, she got the man himself, 6'2", dark-haired, with grey-green eyes, and the kind of stillness that suggested he was always thinking 3 moves ahead, and 2 hours of conversation that never once felt like a meeting. Sebastian Callaway was 38. He had built his real estate development company from a single warehouse renovation project in his late 20s to a firm now valued at over $4 billion with projects in 12 cities. He was not the kind of man who appeared in glossy magazines by choice. There were almost no personal photos of him online. His professional reputation was immaculate and slightly intimidating. His personal life was, as far as anyone could tell, entirely private. He had asked, at the end of their meeting, if she wanted to continue the conversation over dinner. She had said yes before she fully processed the question. That dinner had led to 3 more, each one longer and more honest than the last, until she found herself sitting across from him at a quiet Italian restaurant called Marcello's on the West Side, telling him things she had not said out loud to anyone. About the marriage, about the slow erosion of herself, about the divorce, and the way she still sometimes caught herself waiting for permission to have an opinion. Sebastian had listened without fixing anything. That was what she remembered most. He had not tried to reframe her pain into a lesson. He had just sat with it. And then he had said, "You're not someone who needs someone else to complete them, Natalie, but you're allowed to want a partner who actually sees you." She had gone home and stood in front of her bathroom mirror for 10 minutes afterward, not sure what to do with the feeling in her chest. They had seen each other 4 more times since. Nothing had been named. Everything was suspended in that terrifying, honest space of becoming. She did not tell him about Derek's party. She should have. The Alderton House ballroom was everything Natalie expected and everything she dreaded. Tall ceilings with warm amber lighting, round tables set with white peonies and gold-rimmed crystal, a live string quartet playing softly near the window, and approximately 120 people who all looked like they belonged there. Claire was beside her in a midnight blue dress, already scanning the room with the expression of a woman who ran quarterly budget reviews and found chaos slightly exciting. "Breathe," Claire said. "I'm breathing." "You're doing that thing where you breathe with only the top third of your lungs." Natalie accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and breathed with her whole chest. The room smelled like gardenias and expensive candles. Margaret Weston materialized from near the entrance before they'd gotten 10 steps in. 71 years old, silver-haired, wearing a dove-grey Roland Mouret dress, and the expression of a woman who had been quietly managing everyone else's emotions for 50 years. "Natalie." She took both her hands. Her grip was warm and firm. "You look absolutely stunning. I'm so glad you came." "Thank you for inviting me, Margaret. It was selfish of me. I wanted to see you." Her eyes, sharp and genuinely kind, moved across Natalie's face in a way that felt like an appraisal and an apology at the same time. "He doesn't know you're here. I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, I'm glad you came. You deserve to take up space in rooms like this." It was such a precise and knowing thing to say that Natalie nearly cried right there beneath the amber chandelier. They found their table. She and Claire were seated near the back, which was exactly where someone who didn't expect to be seen would be placed. Fine. Better that way. For 40 minutes, it was almost manageable. Claire introduced herself to people at the neighboring table with the cheerful aggression of someone who had decided this was a sociology experiment. Natalie ate a small plate of salmon and reminded herself that she had rebuilt her life, was building something new, and was wearing a dress that Patricia from Lyndon and Grace had practically blessed. Then Derek walked in. He entered from the side door, laughing at something his friend and business partner, Scott Henley, had just said. He was wearing a charcoal suit that had been tailored within an inch of its life, and he looked, Natalie had to admit, exactly like himself. Handsome in that architectural way, the kind of attractive that photographed well and meant nothing to the people who knew him best. Beside him was Cassandra Lee Weston, now 32, formerly a hospitality consultant who had worked with several of Derek's business contacts, was everything that could be specifically designed to be the opposite of Natalie. Where Natalie was auburn-haired and quietly pretty, Cassandra was platinum blonde and built for attention. Where Natalie had grown quieter in the marriage, Cassandra seemed to expand into every room she entered. She wore a white dress, still, apparently, because they had just married 3 months ago, with a diamond necklace that caught the light like a weapon. She was laughing, too. They were, in the external language of surfaces, exactly what they looked like, a power couple in full bloom. And Derek's eyes found Natalie across the room like they had been searching for her all along. The smile that crossed his face was the thing that hit her hardest. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't warmth. It was satisfaction. The slow, deliberate smile of a man who had wanted an audience for something and had just realized his audience had arrived. He crossed the room. "Natalie." He kissed her cheek with practiced smoothness. "I didn't expect to see you here. Your mother invited me." Something flickered behind his eyes, a fast irritation that he buried immediately. "Of course she did." He stepped back and turned to the woman beside him. "Natalie, this is Cassandra, my wife." Cassandra smiled with her whole face, which was either genuinely warm or the best performance Natalie had ever seen. "I've heard so much about you," she said. Natalie had absolutely no idea what to say to that, so she said, "Congratulations," and meant it to sound neutral, and it did. Derek looked at her dress, her bare neck, no jewelry by choice, because she liked the way the emerald silk spoke for itself, her unthreatening glass of champagne. "You look well," he said, in the tone he'd always used when he was waiting for her to say something that would give him an advantage. "What are you doing these days? Still at that design firm?" That design firm, as if Holt and Pine were a hobby he was tolerating. "Yes," she said. "It's going really well, actually. We just landed a significant account." "Great," he said, with the smile of a man who had already stopped listening. He went on to tell her, over the next 6 minutes, she counted, or Claire did, nudging her in the ribs with each passing 60 seconds, that he and Cassandra had honeymooned in the Maldives, that they were looking at property in Aspen, that Cassandra had an eye for luxury residential design that was frankly extraordinary. Wasn't it extraordinary, Cassandra? Yes, thank you, Derek. And wasn't it funny how life worked out, he said, looking directly at Natalie with that smile still in place. Wasn't it funny how things fell into the right place eventually? "It really is," Natalie said. Claire's hand found hers under the table when Derek and Cassandra moved on, swept away by Scott Henley and a cluster of business contacts. Claire turned to her and said very quietly, "That man is deeply, specifically cruel, and I need you to know that you are so far above this room right now that I can barely see you from here." Natalie laughed, which helped. She reached for her phone, almost without deciding to, and typed a message to Sebastian. "I know this is strange, but I'm at a thing and it's harder than I expected. I wish you were here." She almost deleted it. She sent it. His response came in under 2 minutes. "Where are you?" she told him. There was a pause. Then, "I know the Alderton house. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave." She didn't tell Claire. She put her phone in her clutch and decided to simply let whatever was happening happen, because she had spent enough years managing other people's comfort at the expense of her own needs to know what the alternative felt like. 23 minutes later, she felt the room change. It was the only way she could describe it afterward. A subtle shift, the way a room feels when a storm is still miles away, but the pressure has already dropped. Several people near the entrance looked up from their conversations. The string quartet did not miss a note, but the second violinist, a young woman in black, glanced towards the door. Sebastian Calloway did not make entrances. He simply arrived, and his presence was sufficient. He was in a dark navy suit, not event-ready, more like he had been doing something else entirely, and changed his course. And his grey-green eyes moved through the room with calm efficiency until they found her. He came directly to her table. No navigation required, no pause to read the room or calculate optics. He said, "Hi," and everything about the word was just for her. "Hi," she said back. He looked at Claire, who was staring at him with the expression of someone recalibrating everything they thought they knew about their sister's situation. "You must be Claire," he said. "Natalie talks about you constantly. I'm Sebastian." He shook her hand with the ease of someone who had no idea his name would mean anything to anyone in this room. But it did, because Sebastian Calloway had done $200 million of development in Portland alone over the last 5 years, and at least 30 of the 120 people in this ballroom knew exactly who he was. Sebastian, Claire repeated, as if filing it. Has the evening been terrible? He asked Natalie. Moderate, she said, a strong 6 out of 10 on the terrible scale. Right. He looked around the room with the quiet attention he gave everything, and she watched him locate Derek and Cassandra in under 4 seconds. He said nothing about it. He sat beside her, and the remaining hour of dinner was, in the specific and irreversible way of some hours, completely different from all the ones that had preceded it. He was easy to sit next to. He listened to things she said, as if he intended to keep them. When she told a story about a disastrous client presentation at Holt and Pine, where the wrong logo had played on a 12-foot screen for 45 seconds before anyone caught it, he laughed. Genuinely. Fully. Not the polished social laugh she had spent years trying to earn from Derek. Claire excused herself to use the restroom and walked away at a pace that suggested she was giving them space on purpose. You should have told me, Sebastian said. About tonight? I didn't want it to be a thing. It's a thing. I know, she admitted. He was quiet for a moment, then, is he making it worse that I'm here? She thought about it honestly. No, he hasn't come back over. I think seeing me not alone has confused his game plan. Sebastian nodded once, like that was the answer he expected. He picked up his champagne glass, and Natalie noticed, not for the first time, how he held things. Not loosely, not with the affectation of someone performing ease, but with actual presence, as if whatever he was touching deserved his full attention. She was still thinking about that when the program director tapped his microphone and asked all guests to find their seats for the evening's formal remarks. What happened next was not planned. Or rather, it was planned by someone. Just not by Natalie. The program was exactly the kind of event Natalie could have designed herself, because she had, in fact, designed 3 nearly identical events for Derek's company over the course of their marriage. The gold script projector slides, the curated photo reel, the careful, practiced informality of remarks that had been rehearsed until they sounded spontaneous. Scott Henley spoke first, raising a glass to Derek and Cassandra with the enthusiasm of a man who was being paid in friendship to do this well. He talked about Derek's vision, his commitment, his drive. He talked about Cassandra as a woman who finally matched Derek's energy. He used the word deserve 4 times in 6 minutes, which Natalie thought was a choice. Then Cassandra spoke, brief, gracious, her voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone who had always been comfortable in ballrooms. And then Derek stood. He began with all the expected things: gratitude, love, the particular choreography of a speech designed to land in photographs and be quoted in Instagram captions. He was good at it. He had always been good at it. And then, roughly 3 minutes in, he deviated from the expected. I want to acknowledge, Derek said, his voice carrying the precise weight of a man who had calculated exactly how much this would cost him and decided it was worth it for what it would win. That arriving at the right place takes time, that sometimes we travel roads that aren't the right ones, and those roads teach us things. He paused. His eyes moved, briefly, unmistakably, to Natalie's table. I spent years learning what I didn't want, and now I know exactly what I have. The room applauded. Natalie's face did not move. She had learned during 8 years with Derek Weston how to make her face do exactly nothing when her interior was free fall, but she felt Sebastian beside her go very still. It was not the stillness of discomfort. It was the stillness of a man who had just made a decision. The program director was wrapping up the formal remarks and inviting guests to move to the courtyard for dessert when Sebastian turned to Natalie and said quietly and simply, I'd like to introduce you to some people tonight. Would that be okay? She looked at him. What kind of people? The kind who should know who you are. She should have asked more questions. She did not. The courtyard was warm for September. Heat lamps placed at intervals between the potted olive trees, fairy lights strung above the flagstone path, the smell of fresh lavender from the planters along the low stone wall. It was beautiful in the effortless way that money made things beautiful. Sebastian guided her toward a group near the central fountain. 3 men and 2 women, mid-40s to mid-60s, in the particular relaxed attire of people who were wealthy enough not to need to prove it. She recognized 2 of them from Portland business circles, Richard Crane, a commercial developer, and a woman named Diane Forsyth, who sat on the board of 3 non-profits and a regional bank. "Richard," Sebastian said, extending his hand. "Good to see you." "Sebastian?" Richard Crane shook it with the warmth of genuine respect. "What are you doing here? Don't tell me you've got history with the Western crowd." "Old acquaintances," Sebastian said with the ease of someone who owed no elaboration. He turned, and his hand settled at the small of Natalie's back, present, warm, and unmistakable. "I want you to meet Natalie, my wife." The world stopped. Not the actual world. The courtyard kept going, conversations, the distant string quartet, the soft clink of dessert spoons, but Natalie's interior world, and from the expression on Richard Crane's face and the raised brows of Diane Forsyth, the social world of everyone within earshot, paused for a full 3 seconds to recalibrate. Natalie turned to look at Sebastian. His eyes were steady. There was nothing apologetic in them, but there was something that she would spend the next several days trying to name. Something that looked very much like, "Trust me," or "Don't." But here we are. She turned back to Richard Crane and smiled and said, "Lovely to meet you." Word moved through a room like that with the efficiency of well-oiled gossip, not maliciously, not even consciously, just in the organic way of people who spent their professional lives tracking information. By the time Natalie and Sebastian had completed 1 circuit of the courtyard, the phrase, "Sebastian Calloway's wife," had reached Derek Weston's ears through at least 3 separate channels. She knew because she saw the moment it reached him. He was standing with Cassandra and Scott Henley near the dessert table, a small plate of tarts in his hand, and she watched his eyes find her and Sebastian across the courtyard, and saw, specifically, precisely, the moment his expression changed. Not to anger. That wasn't Derek's first language. It changed to something colder. Recalculation. He excused himself from Cassandra and Scott. He crossed the courtyard. Natalie had expected this. Sebastian, she was fairly certain, had expected this too. What she had not expected was Margaret Weston, appearing like a silver-haired ghost from the rose-planted border to her left, and placing one elegant hand on her son's arm before he reached them. She didn't hear what Margaret said, but she saw Derek's jaw tighten and his pace slow, and she saw Margaret's face, composed, careful, saying something brief. And then Derek straightening his jacket and redirecting his path, veering off toward a cluster of business associates. Conversation apparently concluded. Margaret looked across the courtyard at Natalie. She raised her champagne glass a fraction of an inch. A toast, an apology, a blessing. Natalie exhaled. "What just happened?" she murmured to Sebastian. His mother reminded him that making a scene at his own celebration dinner would cost him more than the point he'd be winning, Sebastian said, without looking particularly surprised by any of it. "How do you know that?" "Because it's what I would have said." He glanced at her. "I've known Margaret Weston socially for about 4 years. She called me last week. She told me you might need someone in your corner tonight." Natalie stared at him. "Margaret called you." "She did. And you?" She stopped, restarted. "You came here tonight and told Richard Crane I was your wife because Margaret Weston called you." He considered this for a moment with the particular care he gave things. "I came because you texted me, and I wanted to be here. What I said to Richard Crane, that was something else." "Something else," she repeated. "Something I should probably explain properly," he said. "Not here." They stayed another 40 minutes. It was, bizarrely, almost pleasant, the particular kind of pleasant that follows an explosion that turned out not to be an explosion. Claire found her and grabbed her arm and whispered fiercely, "Sebastian Calloway called you his wife, and you did not tell me you were seeing Sebastian Calloway." And Natalie said, "I'll explain everything in the car, I promise." And Claire said, "You'd better, because I ran his Wikipedia page in the bathroom, and Natalie he is worth." And Natalie said, "Claire, please." Cassandra found her at the coat rack. She came alone, which surprised Natalie. She had Natalie's coat in her hand, had apparently collected it from the attendant already, a gesture that was either strange or deliberate or both. "Here," she said, offering it. "Thank you." Cassandra looked at her for a moment with an expression that Natalie had not been prepared for. Not triumph, not hostility, but something that looked tired and complicated and almost honest. "He told me about you," she said. "Not the real version. His version." She paused. "I think I know the difference now." Natalie looked at her. Really looked. Past the platinum hair and the diamond necklace. At the woman beneath the surface of all Derek's framing. She thought about what it would mean, what it would cost to be married to that version of herself, to be the new prize in a competition the prize didn't choose to enter. "I hope you know your version of yourself," Natalie said finally, "the one that isn't his." Cassandra held her gaze. "Working on it," she said quietly. She walked back into the room. Natalie stood with her coat in her hands for a long moment. Then she walked out of the Alderton house into the cool September air and found Sebastian waiting on the stone steps, jacket on, hands in his pockets, looking at the street with the patient attention of a man who had been trained by something or someone to take the long view of things. "I want that explanation," she said. "I know. Not tomorrow. Now. There's a bar on Hoyt Street that I like," he said. "Good whiskey. No tablecloths. Lead the way," she said. The bar was called Hoyt and Barrel, tucked between a florist and a printing shop on a block that hadn't yet decided whether it was being renovated or wasn't, with low wood-beam ceilings and a back corner that was almost always empty after 9 on a Saturday. They took the corner booth. Sebastian ordered scotch. Natalie ordered the same, which surprised him. She could tell from the slight adjustment at the corner of his mouth. "You don't seem like a Scotch person," he said. "I'm not. But tonight feels like it requires it." They were quiet for a moment. The comfortable kind, which Natalie noted distantly was not something she had often experienced. Quiet around Derek had always been loaded, always something she was trying to navigate. Quiet around Sebastian felt like a legitimate pause. "Margaret called me on a Monday," he began, 8 days ago. "She said she'd added your name to the invitation list for Derek's event. She said she wasn't sure if you'd go, but if you did, she wanted someone there who," her exact words were, "would remind the room of Natalie's value, since my son has done such a thorough job of obscuring it." Natalie was quiet. "She told me a fair amount about your marriage," he continued, "not as gossip, as context. She was, I think the word is mortified, at her son, at the person he became in that relationship. She said she'd watched you make yourself smaller for years, and she'd never found the courage to say something, because she didn't know how to, without making it worse." "Why come to you, specifically?" Natalie asked. "Because she knew I knew you. She'd heard, she didn't say how, that we'd been spending time together." He looked at her steadily. "I think Margaret Weston pays close attention to things she considers important. And introducing me as your wife was not what I planned exactly." He turned his glass slowly on the table. "I was going to introduce you, just introduce you, but I watched that speech Derek gave, watched where his eyes went when he talked about the roads that taught him things. And I thought about the fact that you've spent the last 14 months convincing yourself that the dissolution of that marriage was something you needed to recover from. Like an illness. Like it was something that happened to you rather than something you survived." He paused. "I wanted to give the room. And you, honestly. A different frame. By claiming me as your wife. By making clear that you were, without any question, someone worth claiming. He met her eyes. I know it wasn't my call to make. I know it was overstepping, and I need you to tell me if it was wrong. She thought about Richard Crane's face, about Diane Forsyth's raised brows, about the way the word wife had moved through the ballroom, about Derek's expression when it reached him. She thought about Cassandra, tired and honest at the coat rack, saying working on it. She thought about Sebastian, standing on those stone steps with his hands in his pockets and his patience intact. It wasn't wrong, she said. It also wasn't entirely a performance, he said. Quietly. The way he said everything important, without decoration, without the build-up that asked for a specific response, just the sentence, offered, and whatever she did with it was hers. She looked at him for a long time. Sebastian. Yes. Are you telling me? I am telling you, he said, that I have been trying to find the right time to say something to you for approximately 6 weeks, and tonight's circumstances are neither the right time nor the right place. But I am apparently not as patient as I thought I was. He picked up his glass. I'm not asking for an answer to anything tonight. I just wanted you to know that when I said it, I meant it in a direction. Meant it in a direction. She had never heard someone describe the beginning of love that way, and yet it was exactly the right phrase. The kind of phrase that came from a man who thought carefully before he spoke and still wasn't quite ready. Okay, she said. Okay? I mean... She pressed her fingers against her eyes for a moment and then laughed, and it was the real laugh, the one that came without warning. I don't have a polished response to this. I'm sitting in a bar on a Saturday night, having just watched my ex-husband perform his entire personality at a public event, having been introduced as your wife to half of Portland's development sector. And now you are... She looked at him. I like you enormously. I have been trying not to make it complicated. It's not complicated, he said, with the calm of someone who actually meant it. It is a little complicated. Not on my end. She picked up her scotch, which was smoky and too strong and exactly what the moment required. Ask me something, she said. He thought about it for a moment. What do you want the next year of your life to look like, without anyone else's story in it? Just yours. She had not expected the question to hit her the way it did. She had not expected to feel in the answering of it the first clear sense of her own horizon she'd had in years. She told him, all of it, the design work she actually wanted to pursue, the gallery space in the Pearl District she'd looked at twice and never let herself properly want, the trips she'd been putting in the back drawer of herself, the apartment that was good but not really hers yet, the version of her life that felt like it was a few deliberate choices away from being real. He listened to all of it. That sounds like a good life, he said. It does, she agreed. I think I believe that now. The next morning, Portland was grey and cool, the kind of September morning that smelled like wet stone and almost autumn, and Natalie made coffee in her kitchen in the Pearl District and thought about the night before with the particular clarity that arrives after significant things have passed through you. Claire had called at 10 the night before from her hotel room. You're going to tell me everything tomorrow, not a summary. Everything. Then softer. I think he's good for you, Nat. I think he's actually good. Tom Banks, her brother-in-law, whom Natalie had always liked for his steady sensibility, had texted separately. Ran into Sebastian Calloway at a conference 2 years ago. Smart, quiet, no ego. You're in good company. She sat at her kitchen table with her coffee and her phone and thought about what needed to come next. Not in the relationship, which was still becoming, but in herself. The gallery space, the freelance projects she'd been declining because she didn't believe she was ready. The half-finished portfolio she'd been building for 2 years and perpetually deciding wasn't finished enough to show. She opened her design portfolio on her laptop and looked at it honestly for the first time in months. It was good. Not almost good. Good. She registered the gallery space inquiry form before she could talk herself out of it. Then she called Rosie, who screamed for approximately 45 seconds when told what had happened at the Alderton house, then said, "Wait." He said, "Wife? In front of everyone?" And Natalie said, "I need you to please take a breath." And Rosie said, "I am breathing while screaming. It's possible." Then the morning settled. She thought about Cassandra Weston and hoped, in a way that surprised her with its sincerity, that the woman was building something true. She thought about Margaret, raising that glass across the courtyard, and made a note to send her flowers with a real note, not a card. She thought about Derek's face when Sebastian's presence in the room recalibrated everything he'd planned. She let the thought move through her and out the other side without staying in it. He was not, she decided, worth more than 30 seconds of this particular morning. Her phone buzzed. "Sebastian, good morning. Are you working today?" She typed back, thinking about it. "You?" "I have a site visit in the afternoon. There's a warehouse in the Lloyd district I've been looking at for a mixed-use project. You said once you'd like to see how the early stages of a development work before the brand identity layer." She read it twice. He had remembered. She had said that, offhandedly, weeks ago, as an aside in a longer conversation about her design work and the gap between what clients wanted and what buildings actually needed. He had filed it. She typed, "I'd like that." "Good," he sent back. "I'll pick you up at 2. She closed her laptop and looked out the window at the grey Portland morning and felt, with a certainty that was not loud but was completely stable, that she was standing at the beginning of something built on a foundation that would hold. 3 months later, Derek and Cassandra Weston separated. Natalie found out not from the newspapers, though the business pages carried a brief, bloodless notice about Derek stepping back from day-to-day leadership of Western Capital Group following a personal restructuring, but from Margaret, who called on a Tuesday and said simply, "She left him. She found out about the Forsyth Hotel contracts and what he'd done with the numbers. She's getting a very good attorney, and I have no intention of interfering." "I'm sorry, Margaret," Natalie said. "Don't be." A pause. "I'm not." Another pause, longer. "How are you, sweetheart?" "Good," Natalie said. "Actually good." "I know," Margaret said warmly. "I hear things." The gallery show opened in December, a combined exhibition of Natalie's design work and a selection of the large-format paintings she'd returned to over the past year, the ones she'd almost convinced herself were private. Sebastian had been the first person she'd shown the paintings to, standing in her apartment, surrounded by canvases she'd propped against every available wall, and he had been quiet for a long time before saying, "These should be seen?" The opening was a Thursday night. The gallery, a small but respected space called Meridian, on the south side of the Pearl District, had modest expectations. 200 people showed up. Several of them were people she'd met at the Alderton house in September. Richard Crane, Diane Forsyth, and a collection of others from the orbit she'd entered by accident and stayed in by choice. They came because Sebastian had, without fuss, mentioned the show in 3 separate professional conversations and let it travel from there. He stood near the back of the gallery for most of the evening, the way he did at things, present, unobtrusive, letting everything be hers. She found him there near the end of the night, after the crowd had thinned, and the gallery's owner, a woman named Philippa Cole, who wore paint-stained loafers to her own openings and made no apologies about it, had quietly told Natalie that 7 pieces had sold. 7, she said to Sebastian. "I know," he said. "I was counting." She laughed. "Of course you were." He had one hand in his pocket and was looking at the largest painting, a wide canvas she'd done in August, dark blues and deep ochres, abstract and unresolvable, the kind of painting that had come out of her without a plan. She'd almost pulled it from the show twice. "That's the one," he said. That's the best one. You think so? Yes. He looked at her, and the gallery lights were warm against his face. You made that without permission from anyone. She understood what he meant. She understood it precisely. I'm going to tell you something, she said. Okay. When you introduced me as your wife that night... Natalie, let me finish. She turned toward him. I spent the first week afterward trying to decide how to feel about it, whether it was presumptuous, whether I should address it directly, or just let it be the kind of thing that gets filed under unusual circumstances. And then I realized I was doing the thing again, managing the situation, instead of just being honest about it. He waited. It didn't feel wrong, she said. It felt like something I wanted to grow into. Eventually. She paused. I just wanted you to know that. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. His particular quiet, the kind that had weight and intention in it. Eventually works for me, he said. Rosie, who had been pretending to study a sculpture near the window, was very obviously listening. Claire, on a video call from Seattle, had FaceTimed into the opening just to see the paintings, and was now clearly focused on the conversation happening across the room. Philippa Cole was pouring wine near the desk and had her back turned with the exaggerated care of someone determined not to be perceived as eavesdropping. Natalie was aware of all of them and none of them at once. Good, she said. Sebastian smiled. The real one, the full one that she'd learned was rare and therefore worth cataloguing. Good, he said back. The new year came quietly to Portland, cold and clear-skied, the kind of night where the city lights reflected on the Willamette River like scattered copper coins. Natalie Hargrove stood on the balcony of an apartment she was in the process of making genuinely hers. New shelves, plants she'd chosen herself, one of her own paintings on the wall above the bookcase, and thought about everything that had brought her to this particular Tuesday night. She thought about the woman she had been at 24, carrying hope like something reckless. She thought about the 8 years of quiet erosion, and the Tuesday in November she had walked into an attorney's office and reclaimed the trajectory of her own life. She thought about 14 months of rebuilding, slow, unglamorous, and important. She thought about an emerald silk dress and a cream invitation, and the terrifying decision to take up space in a room that had never properly been hers. She thought about a corner booth and scotch she didn't usually drink, and a man who said, "I meant it," in a direction, and then showed up, consistently and without fanfare, in the direction he had meant. She had not fixed herself by meeting Sebastian Calloway. That was the thing she needed to say clearly, to herself and anyone else. The gallery show, the paintings, the portfolio, the life she was building, those were hers. They predated him. They would persist beyond whatever shape the future took. He was not the explanation for her becoming. He was someone who had arrived when she was already in the process of becoming, and had recognized the work she was doing and added himself to it. That was different. That was, she thought, everything. Her phone was on the balcony railing. She picked it up and saw a text from Claire sent at 11:58. "Happy New Year, Nat. I'm proud of you. Not because of anything that happened this year specifically, but because of who you've become while it was happening. I love you." She typed back, "I love you too. I'm good, Claire. I really am." She meant it. Below her, the city moved and turned and went on being itself, indifferent to her story, as cities always are, which was the exact right amount of indifference. Her story didn't need the city's attention. It didn't need an audience, or a ballroom, or an ex-husband's recalculated expression across a courtyard. It only needed her, and she was here. Fully. Finally. Natalie didn't need Derek's party to prove anything. She didn't need a billionaire to rescue her. What she needed, what she finally gave herself, was the courage to walk into a room she almost avoided, wearing a dress she almost didn't buy, and refuse to make herself small for anyone. Sebastian didn't save her. He simply saw her, and she let herself be seen. Because here's the truth this story leaves us with. The most powerful thing a woman can do after someone spends years making her feel like almost enough is to look at her own life and say, this is more than enough. I am more than enough. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love or a version of yourself you're still fighting for, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story that matters. Because every week, we bring you the kind of drama that also tells the truth. See you next time.